Come join me on my second channel, Jaguar Gator 8, where we'll talk all things college football. New video drops every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch the latest video. And now, on with our feature presentation. When you think of players on the Cardinals to wear the number 40 jersey, odds are the first name that comes to mind is this guy right here. This is safety Pat Tillman, and it makes sense why most people would associate that jersey number with him, seeing as the Cardinals retired it in his honor due to his tragic death and his service in the United States military. However, if you ask an older generation of Cardinals fans, as in a generation that associates the Cardinals with their time in St. Louis instead of their time in Arizona, odds are they'll associate that jersey with another player on the other side of the ball. Because for many Cardinals fans, the best number 40 is this guy right here. This is wide receiver Bobby Joe Conrad, and for over a decade, he was a key contributor on the Cardinals, and was one of the best players at his position in the entire National Football League. But for as great as he was on the field, and for all of his amazing on-field accomplishments, he might be best remembered today for how his time with the Cardinals came to an end, because it truly is nothing short of bizarre. You had Conrad in pursuit of a coveted record that he desperately wanted. You had Conrad come up just short of said record. You had Conrad throw a fit and demand a trade, declaring that he was never going to play for the Cardinals again after failing to get the record. And you had an incredibly bizarre twist involving a massive error on the part of the NFL that turns this already crazy situation into one of the craziest situations you're ever going to see. This is the story behind the most controversial drama involving the pursuit of a record in NFL history. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand just who Bobby Joe Conrad was, how good he was on the field, and what exactly he was pursuing. In 1958, the New York Giants drafted Conrad in the 5th round of the NFL Draft. Although before Conrad even played a game with the team, he would be traded to the then-named Chicago Cardinals in one of the best yet most underrated win-win trades in NFL history. The Giants received Pat Summerall, who was one of the most accurate kickers in football, and received Lyndon Crow, a defensive back who made the Pro Bowl with the Giants. And the Cardinals received Conrad, who was nothing short of superb. Even though he didn't do a whole lot to start off his NFL career, by 1961, when the Cardinals had truly established themselves in St. Louis, he worked his way into the starting lineup, and finished second on the team with 30 receptions, and second on the team with 499 receiving yards. The 1961 season was his true introduction into the local scene. The 1962 season, however, was his true introduction to the national scene. Because beginning in 1962, it would be impossible for the hardcore football fan to not know who he was, because Conrad established himself that year as one of the best receivers in the game. In 1962, Conrad once again finished second on the team in receptions and receiving yards, although this time, his numbers were significantly better, as he had 62 receptions for 954 yards. Not only did he finish 9th in the league in receiving yards that year, but his 62 receptions ranked 3rd in the NFL, only behind his teammate Sonny Randle, who had 63, and Washington's Bobby Mitchell, who would eventually make the Hall of Fame. Conrad was near the top of the leaderboard in that category in 1962. In 1963, however, Conrad would be at the top, as he was named a first-team All-Pro by the Associated Press for the first time in his career after finishing the season with 73 receptions for 967 yards and 10 touchdowns. While he ranked 6th in the league in yards and 4th in touchdowns, in receptions, he ranked 1st, as he was the only player in football with at least 70 receptions. By leading the league in that category, Conrad became just the second player in team history to accomplish this feat, as the only other player to do this was Gaynell Tinsley back in 1938, when he led the league with 41 receptions. Drastically different times. Conrad kept up this great production throughout the rest of the mid-60s. In 1964, he made it to the first Pro Bowl of his career after a season where he had 61 receptions for 680 yards and 6 touchdowns, where he finished 4th in the league in receptions, and he guided the Cardinals to the Playoff Bowl with a 9-3-2 record, which was their best record since they made the NFL Championship all the way back in 1948. And in 1965, he followed that up with 58 receptions and 909 yards, finishing 6th in receptions and 5th in receiving yards. Conrad was one of the best players that the Cardinals had, and was one of the best receivers in football. He was as reliable as they come. He had very good hands, and he had the ability to run just about every route. as his route tree was extremely diverse. And to show just how good he was, from 1961 to 67, he had 365 receptions for 5,134 yards. In that time frame, he was one of just 6 receivers to have that many receptions, and was one of just 8 receivers to post that many yards. By the time the 1967 season ended, Conrad was etching his name in NFL history, as his career stat line of 386 receptions for 5,379 yards was one of the best of all time. He ranked inside the top 15 in career receptions, and ranked inside the top 30 in career yards. And in Cardinals history, his legacy was already cemented, as by 1967, he was second all-time in receiving yards, just 59 yards shy of Sonny Randle for the all-time lead, and he was the all-time leader in receptions. Entering the 1968 season, Conrad was contemplating retirement. A part of him wanted to be closer to home, as he was a Texas guy through and through, having been born in Texas, having gone to high school in Texas, and having went to college in Texas by going to Texas A&M. A part of him did not like and did not get along with head coach Charlie Winter, especially after a game against the New Orleans Saints where, even though they won 31-20, he complained about not being a part of the game plan. A part of him just didn't want to play for a losing club, as the Cardinals were not a very good team, and finished the 1967 season with a below 500 record of 6-7-1, winning just one of their final 6 games, with that game being the aforementioned Saints game. However, Conrad decided that he wanted to return to the club. And the reason for that? Well, there was one thing pulling him back to St. Louis, and one thing only. He had his eyes on history. Because remember what I said about Conrad having great hands and being great at catching the football? Turns out, he was historically good. On November 12, 1961, Conrad caught 4 passes for 71 yards in a 45-14 loss to the Detroit Lions. Little did anyone know at the time of that game that history was being made, because from that game until the end of the 1967 season, Conrad caught a pass in every single game that he played in. This meant that he caught a pass in 89 consecutive games. The NFL record? That was held by Don Hutson, the greatest receiver in the history of the sport by that point, who did it in 94 consecutive games between 1937 and 1945 as a member of the Green Bay Packers. Conrad was just 5 games shy of tying history, and 6 games shy of breaking the coveted record for most consecutive games with a reception. And with history on his mind, and with a record within striking distance with just half a season of consistent play, Conrad decided that he would be coming back for his 11th season with the Cardinals. In Week 1 against the Los Angeles Rams, he had 5 receptions for 42 yards. The streak went to 90 games. In Week 2 against the San Francisco 49ers, he had 1 reception for 4 yards. It wasn't by much, but the streak went to 91 games. In Week 3 against the New Orleans Saints, he had 2 receptions for 22 yards. The streak went to 92 games. And in Week 4 against the Dallas Cowboys, he had 2 receptions for 23 yards. The streak was now at 93 games. And with that, we head to Cleveland Municipal Stadium for this Week 5 matchup on October 13th between the Cardinals and the Browns. The football world was watching for one reason, and for one reason only. They wanted to see history. Conrad just needed 1 catch in the game, and he would tie Don Hutson's coveted record. What's about to happen next, however, is nothing short of insanity. Prepare yourself for an unbelievable, drama-filled roller coaster of events. The Cardinals won this game 27-21, but there's a reason I'm not showing any highlights of the game and of Conrad's record-tying catch. And that's because, well, it never happened. Needing just 1 catch over the course of 60 minutes to tie this record that took 7 years to get, Conrad, for the first time since the November 5th, 1961 game against the Dallas Cowboys, was held without a catch. You'd think at this point, with everyone knowing about the record, and with the record being so close that you're able to touch it, that the Cards would have given him something simple. A slant pass, a screen pass, literally anything to get the ball in his hands. Instead, nothing. The ball only went to Conrad twice all game. On one pass, the ball sailed well out of bounds, and on another pass, even though Conrad caught it, the play was negated due to an offensive penalty. The Cardinals threw 24 passes during this game, of which 9 were completed. None of those completions went to Conrad. And how do you think Conrad took the news? 7 years of hard work down the drain. all because he couldn't get a catch within one game of the record, even though literally the only reason he came back to the Cardinals was to break Hutson's record. Do you think he took the news well? Of course not. He was furious and went full scorched earth on the team. Any goodwill he may have had toward the organization after playing for them for over a decade was completely gone by this point, because he let head coach Charlie Winter have it. Remember, as I'm reading these comments, that the Cardinals won this football game. Conrad said that after failing to get the record, he wanted out of St. Louis. He said, "I can't take it any longer. Let's face it, since Coach Winter has been here, I haven't done anything. Maybe I'm washed up and don't know it, but I think the difficulty is partly a personality problem." Conrad, who said he was fed up, continued his rage, saying, "It takes 7 years to get a record like that. I felt that this might be my last year anyhow, and I debated a bit about coming back for it this season. Winter said afterwards that he was sorry that I didn't get the record, but then it was too late. He showed me statistics on how I had been thrown to more than any other receiver over several years, and that I'd been thrown to about 6 times in the Cleveland game, but the ball actually got there for me only twice." Yeah, that's a pretty big difference between 6 and 2. And I love that Winter's strategy to ease the situation after throwing away 7 years of hard work was to deliver a quasi-apology, saying, "I'm sorry you couldn't get the record, but if you look at the numbers, it's kind of your fault." By this point, the damage was done. Conrad never played for the Cardinals again after the 1968 season, as he demanded a trade shortly after his failure to get the record, and wound up playing the 1969 season, his last in the NFL, with the Dallas Cowboys. And if you think that time heals all wounds, oh, it does not at all. Conrad had an interview with the Sports and Torts podcast in 2014, roughly half a century after that game took place, and you can still hear his anger and disappointment in not getting the record and hear how bitter he was toward Charlie Winter. Take a listen.
You had an extremely long streak for games with the reception. We had 93 games in a row from 61 to 68. How disappointing was it to see that streak end?
That's the reason I ended up in Dallas. We got to the 93, and we had Wiggy back son-in-law as the head coach at the time, and Charlie Winter, and they threw the first pass of the ball game to me on a little slant that I should have caught, but he threw it where I couldn't even touch it. And after that, I didn't have but one more chance the whole ball game. So I was pretty upset.
So you might think that's the end of our story, right? Conrad came within one game of the record, couldn't get it, and was so upset that he wanted out. Prepare yourself for this, because in an insane twist, as it turns out, Conrad held the record the whole time. That's right. Entering that Week 5 game in 1968 against the Browns, Conrad was the all-time leader in most consecutive games with a reception. What do I mean by this? On Christmas Eve 1994, a critical discovery was made that would have changed NFL history. Because Don Hutson's 94-game streak that Conrad was so badly chasing and coveting, the streak was a lie. The streak never happened. Turns out, in a 1941 game against the Cleveland Rams, Hutson didn't record a catch. In actuality, Hutson had 2 separate streaks, the first of which was 44 games, and the second of which was 50. He never had a 94-game streak. There was a bookkeeping error that for some reason, no one at the NFL caught for half a century. They somehow glossed over that game against the Rams, so without knowing it, Conrad held the record the whole time. As Seymour Seawoff, the president of the Elias Sports Bureau at the time and the official statistician of the NFL since 1961, said on the Discovery, "At the time we took over the NFL, there were few records, so we had to research everything. There wasn't even a record for consecutive pass receptions, so we created the category. On the basis of the evidence we had at the time, we missed the game that Hutson didn't catch a pass in. And no one caught it for that long, because by the time the mistake was found, the streak had long been exceeded. And it wasn't even the Elias Sports Bureau who caught the mistake. It was a random Packers fan by the name of Eric Oska, who said on Conrad he owned the record at one time and didn't even know it. So just to recap what happened here. Bobby Joe Conrad was so upset about not getting the record that he burned his bridges with the Cardinals and carried on a grudge that he still holds to this day more than half a century later. And in actuality, he held the record this entire time without ever knowing it, and the Browns game meant nothing to the record. Based on the way Conrad still talks about that game, I'm not even sure he realizes that he held the record. And even on Conrad's Wikipedia page, it says that he came within a game of breaking Don Hutson's record, which is false, because it turns out he beat Hutson by 43 games. They say that all records are meant to be broken, but in today's day and age where information is readily available and where records are consistently updated, I don't think we're ever going to see a record quite as dramatic as this one. Bobby Joe Conrad came back to the NFL solely in pursuit of a coveted record that he had this whole time without ever knowing it. Today, Bobby Joe Conrad is remembered as one of the best receivers in the roughly 125-year history of the Cardinals, and is remembered as one of the best receivers in the entire NFL throughout the 1960s. But his lasting legacy might be the fact that he might be one of the only players in the history of the sport to hold a coveted record and have no idea that he did it. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.